Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to another episode of Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Stephen Fryer. Stephen, we chatted I think it was 3 years ago, 2019 or something. I was looking through our old chats. Way back when I was doing even different stuff. But anyway, let's give people a bit of an intro to yourself, who you are, and then we'll maybe some of your story, and we'll get into it.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Stephen Fryer. I'm a real estate investor. I live in Canada and I invest in the United States. I have 31 doors in Elkhart and South Bend, Indiana. I live in Ottawa, and I'm recently retired.
Nice.
I do that in air quotes because I found after I retired, I got bored, and so I found myself reinvesting my time into other sort of businesses. But that's my story. And I think I first started investing in real estate in 2013. And I was actually in Florida. I was in Fort Myers, where I had bought a duplex and was doing some wholesaling down there. And my work job, my job, kind of got in the way, and I had to, focus some time and energy on that. And when I got back again, the economy had completely shifted. I think it was in 2013. I think Cape Coral, Fort Myers were probably one of the hardest hit communities following 2008 and the meltdown in the US. And, you could still find value there. People might not have been happy about getting an offer that was maybe less than market, but they would at least listen to you.
Oh, yeah.
By the time I got back, that market was completely boiling over. And so, you would call somebody and, give them an offer on their house, and they'd say, I'm afraid we're not eating from the same menu here. My neighbor, well, they would do it with F-bombs, generally speaking, but my neighbor just had 3 people. He put his house up for sale, and he had 3 people in the front driveway fighting over it. And he got 30% over asking. So I'm not really interested in giving you, a 30% discount on the property. So it was kind of time for me to start looking for another market.
Yeah.
And I found myself in Elkhart, in Indiana.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, we were probably going to talk about something completely different, but I'm interested about the Indiana stuff. So
Sure.
I know everybody knows. I think most people who are doing their research on markets knows that Indiana is a very landlord friendly state, and then so things have been pretty good there. What were you? What is that? What drew you to Indiana, or why?
Do you know what? I wish I could say it was a significant in-depth analysis on the economy of Indiana, on Elkhart and South Bend, and that wasn't really the case. I was actually networking on Bigger Pockets.
Yeah.
And in my interactions there, while I was looking for a new market, I found a person who I eventually partnered with, and she had a remediation business. Her and her son, they were just a small company.
Yeah.
And she had put a house under contract but didn't have the money to close. So honest truth, I didn't really have the money to close, but we partnered up. I went out and found some private money, brought that to the table. We finished up the renovation, sold it, paid back my lender, and pocketed the profits. And that's what got me into Indiana. And I used those profits to buy a duplex and a single family in Elkhart.
That's an awesome story. But and you know what? I think a lot of people get so hung up on the market analysis and trying to pick the perfect place for everything. My very first market was Huntsville, Alabama in the United States. And I did a little bit of research. I knew that they, you know, it was landlord friendly. I'd be able to do rent raises on rent on renewals of releases, and I knew that I could do evictions pretty quick. So that was good enough for me. But honestly, what really was the reason that I bought there is it wasn't far from Nashville, and I liked the idea of going to Nashville and and
The Grand Ole Opry.
yeah, and I'd go there and I'd stay in Nashville and I would commute down and I'd do business and look at houses and do work during the morning and a little bit into the afternoon. Then I go back up and I'd come down with my friends. And my friends were just sitting at the hotel, well, sleeping at the hotel all morning. And then I'd get back and then we'd go out and have fun again all day. And then I'd go back down to work. But
And I wish I could say that there's a lot of sort of attractions in Elkhart and South Bend. South Bend has the Studebaker Museum.
okay.
It has Notre Dame, but it's not exactly the mecca for entertainment, unfortunately. But all the same things about the market to what you described in Huntsville exist. I can do, if I have to have a tenant removed, normally it's within 60 days, they're out the door. As you mentioned, it turns out that Indiana is a very landlord-friendly state, so there's no issues there. And you can find value. Like the way I approach my real estate is, I'm generally speaking, I'm looking to force appreciation. So I'll look for properties that are in distress in one way, shape, or form or another. And then I'll do renovations, put tenants in them, and then keep them for myself. Or if they're not meeting my requirements for my standards, I'll turn around and wholesale them to somebody else or sell them to somebody else, another investor. Kind of a turnkey operation. In that respect.
You mentioned before about getting like retired in quotes, and then you got bored. You know what? It's funny as you say that. It is a concern of mine. You take all this education and it's all about building systems and working yourself out of the job. And as you work yourself more and more out, I found all these little things to work on around the house. And honestly, I'm concerned what I'm going to do when I get all those things done.
Excellent question. Excellent question. And so for me, I mean, I spent 30 years in the public service, and my issue is a little bit different. It turned out that I had a new manager who was had created a toxic work environment, and I actually enjoyed the work that I did. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. But unfortunately, that change of circumstances, it was having a negative impact on my health, on my relationships with my family. When you come home angry every day, it's not a good sign, right? And so you're forced. I guess we could say we had irreconcilable differences, and I kind of had to choose: do you want to continue working and being mad, or is it time to leave? And so, I was fortunate because I had already undertaken this sort of road to financial independence with real estate, that it allowed me to make that leap, right? Like it's that old song, take this job and shove it, I ain't working here no more. That was kind of what happened there. And I promised myself, that because I had actually matched my T4 income with my real estate. And so I was able to sort of walk away and not have to worry about any impacts. And one of the first things I promised myself that I would do, I love scuba. And so I promised myself I was going to upgrade my certification and become a dive master. I retired. I went and took 2 months and buggered off to Roatan, Honduras. Ooh. And got my certification. And after 2 months, I'm thinking, well, is that all there is? As much as I love scuba, getting up in the morning, eating, going diving, coming back, having lunch, going diving, coming back, eating, being exhausted, going and doing it the same thing the next day. It was like, I guess there's got to be more to it than that. And so when I came home, I actually hung out my own shingle and I started my own consulting firm. And right now what I'm doing is, in addition to my real estate, Um, I guess you could call it a conflict resolution consultant. We do workplace investigations into harassment and workplace violence, mediation, um, adjudication, so arbitration, those kinds of things. And that keeps me busy. In the morning, I go golfing in the afternoon, and I plan to bugger off again in the winter and go diving again. So life is good.
That's life is good. It's all about doing what you want to do. I love it. And yeah, speaking of doing it, like I know we both have children, right? So um I've been thinking about this a lot too. And so when you pitched the idea of the fire, it really struck home because my kids are still young, but there's a lot of like lessons to teach people. There's a lot of things to go through. And you mentioned that your kids were working on, or your boys were working on some fire, which, you know, for people who don't understand what we're talking about, they think we're literally talking about a bonfire or something.
My beard's not on fire, man.
No. We're talking about like financial independence and retiring early, right? So what kind of age group are your boys in, and what are they trying to do right now? When I started investing in the US, I did it by myself and had to go through the growing pains of doing that. GlennSutherland.com/coaching. A 12-week coaching program done 1 hour per week over Zoom from the comfort of your own home. Classes are kept to 5 people to be able to answer everyone's questions. Shortcut the process. Make fewer mistakes. Curriculum available at GlennSutherland.com/coaching.
My boys are in their 20s. They've just finished university now, and I guess they're sort of embarking on their, first jobs and their first, stab at a career. And following sort of my experience with the government, we wound up with a lot of sort of discussions about financial independence and, a lot. I think at school, there's probably not a lot of discussion about financial independence. And in our day, it was kind of a taboo subject. I think when I was growing up, my parents never talked about finances with us. And so, I made it a point to sort of talk about the importance of being financially independent, so that if something bad happens, you have options. And that was kind of what was motivating me. And so we've had a lot of discussions in the last couple of years about it. There's sort of many ways to skin a cat when you talk about financial independence. When the FIRE community talks about financial independence, they're essentially, for us, I should say, financial independence is when you're no longer reliant on that T4 income, when your assets are producing sufficient income to match your expenses. Then you're considered to be financially independent. That's your FU money. You can walk away because you're not reliant on it. If you choose to continue working because you enjoy what you're doing, more power to you. Yeah. But you're financially independent. When I was growing up, I'm thinking of the old Freedom 55, right? My goal was to be retired by 55. And I got started late trying to realize that goal, but from my real estate perspective, I managed to sort of do it in about 5 years. The boys are talking like by the time they're 35, 40, they want to be financially independent. And so the question is like, how do we go about doing that? And what are the different methods that they can use? And so that's what a lot of our conversations sort of revolve around. The standard kind of response for becoming financially independent is you look at the 4% rule. And for those people who are wondering what the 4% rule is, it's a general sort of economic assumption that you amass an amount of money where if you withdraw 4% of that money when it's invested, the investments will continue to provide you with returns of at least 4%. So presumably you can continue to withdraw that 4% of the income out every year and not have to worry about your initial nest egg diminishing or disappearing.
Okay.
But that's an expensive date, man. Like,
yeah, you got to collect a lot of money first to get there.
Absolutely. Like if you decide that you need $50,000 to retire on, that's $1.25 million. Yeah, exactly. Divided by 4%. Like that's $1.25 million you got to amass, assuming that you're getting a 4% return. So like that's challenging. And I looked at different ways, like how could I achieve this goal? And for me, real estate was a more effective tool to do that. Like if you're building assets that are providing you with monthly income, then I'm doing it the same. I'm achieving the same goal, but it's going to cost me a lot less. And I'll give you an example. In South Bend, I can buy a house. I'll use $50,000 as an example right now for this. But let's say we buy a house for $50K. The average rents are $750 a month. So if I assume the 50% rule, I'll need probably 10 houses approximately, or 10 doors, I should say, in order to achieve $4,000 a month, which is $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
So 10 times, I'm assuming they're single families, 10 times $50,000, that's $500K. I've achieved my same goal for less than half the price. So when I say there's many ways to skin a cat, that was how I went about it. But there's lots of other things that people can do. You could start a business, and if you can automate that business, like you said, with systems and processes that allow you to walk away so that it's passive income, well, that's another way for you to generate monthly revenues. You could build a website, for example.
Yeah.
And if you get the website generating $1,000 a month, how many websites would you need to be able to do that? So that's 4 websites at $1,000 a month, and I'll bet you $5 that it's not going to cost me $500,000 to get 4 websites.
No. A little bit, maybe it could be more work, depending on what your background is.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think the point is for the guys is we're having these discussions about what are some of the things that we can do to kind of generate this kind of monthly income for them. Because my goal, to be honest with you, because I knew I was going to have a pension and I was going to be taken care of, my goal really wasn't so much for me when I talked about passive income. It was more to create an income stream for them. So when I passed away, I had a legacy to pass on to them. But now we're at a point where, I was in a mastermind and someone said something to me that really resonated. They said, when you just give somebody something, they don't really appreciate it. And it's one of the reasons why a huge number of businesses that get passed down from generation to generation fail, because the children don't have the same commitment to it that the parents did, because their why isn't big enough, right? Yeah. And so I guess I can teach the kids I can give the kids a fish.
Yeah.
I'll feed them for a day, or I can teach them how to fish and feed them for a lifetime. And so right now that's what we're doing. We're working together, as a family to develop these different income streams for the boys, and they're going to do the work. And they're going to develop it themselves, and they're going to sort of go through their fire journey, and we're going to document how we go about it, and they're going to explain and blog about it so that we can share their experience. So that's kind of where we are as a family, following the whole FI thing. So if your kids want to participate, we'd be more than happy to have them.
Yeah. Well, my kids are a little younger, so I don't know if that works, but I have a 7 and a 5. So, but there is still lots of stuff to teach them at that age, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that even my son, because even being 7, he's just picking up on things that he's like, my dad's at home. My dad, and he's not at home like working on the office. He's in the back shed working on tinkering around with whatever he feels like. And I think that he sees the benefits that he's still at the age where he doesn't understand the work that's went into being able to do that. Right. Which that is, you hit the nail on the head though. It was very concerning to me, like just the legacy wealth of just handing it down. Like you don't want us, they can blow through it so fast. And one of these things dawned on me years ago. back when I had a job. I was in the boardroom and we were moving offices, and I was just looking around to see what kind of interesting stuff and I found one of those big novelty checks. I'm not even joking. Like the full one, it was like a whiteboard eraser thing. You could write on it, you could write it off. So for fun, I wrote myself a check, and I was like, well, how high do you write yourself a check? Because it has to be reasonable. If you put too much, people aren't going to believe that you actually want it. So I think I put like $10,000 on it. And I took a picture of myself and I posted it on Facebook. And you would believe, like, people were just like, oh, you want all that money? Take me to the bar, do this, do that. You know, can I get this? Can I get some money? And I was like, I gotta take this photo down. And I was just like, what would happen if you actually won like the real lottery? Like,
right.
And it really made me think about my future and how you'd run everything. It translated to how I would give money to my kids. And that's where I'm trying to go with this. But what I did was I went, okay, if I actually won this, there'd be all these people that were going to say, hey, can I have this money? You know, can I get some money? I need a loan for it. I need a new car, everything else. So I went, you know what? I'd make it so I don't have any money. Right. And so you're like, well, how would you do that? Well, I just take the whole thing and buy a bunch of apartment buildings. Right. Mm-hmm. Buy a bunch of apartment buildings, and you could set up entities. And this is what I came up with is for family and stuff and my close friends, you set them up with shares. No one's gonna you're not gonna kill them with giving them too much money, because you hear about those lottery winners that blow it all or everything else, and you're like, no, you just give them a trickle that's enough to improve their life. And that's it's concerning to give a whole pile of money to kids even when they get into their 20s, right? I don't know if I was responsible enough when I was in my 20s. I would say I wasn't. I wasn't.
My mother describes money and me when I was in my 20s like water running through my fingers. So I was clearly not responsible enough then.
No, but I still had the entrepreneurial bug in my 20s, right? I created a bunch of companies. They didn't lose money. They didn't make a lot of money. And I found, I think it helped me lead me to the real estate, because I built a screen printing company, and it was one of them, like making t-shirts and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I didn't want a company that was going to be so labor intensive. Every single thing it took labor to produce everything. And back then I had in my head that it was all about a product, right? And building a product. And I'm like, it makes sense, but you got to build these products. Because I also did like junior achievers in high school, which would be another good way to learn business from that. But I was always about stuff. My parents got me at I must have been 8 years old or something. And I'd taken all the ice cream out of the freezer while my parents were away. And I set up a stand in front, and I was making milkshakes for the house. Nice. It didn't actually, for me, it was pure profit. But I don't think it actually made
when
money.
The cost of your goods is zero because you're taking it from the kitchen.
Yeah. But so anyway, maybe to get us back on track a little bit. But so I know that you were talking about businesses and you're talking about real estate. So without we have to go into too much detail, but which way did you sort of lead your boys to start? Like, what was it? Was it the real estate way? Was it a business way, or what?
Good question. I think it's up to them to decide, right? So in our conversations, my youngest, Alex, is in Indianapolis, actually, right now. He's doing a fix and flip.
Nice.
And he's just graduated from Queens, and him and his roommates started a business. It's a limited liability partnership down there.
Yep.
But they're doing fix and flips in Indianapolis. They did their first one last year. And they tapped into some of my contacts in order to find some private money to fund the process. And they're doing their second one now. My oldest, Zachary, he looks at me and goes, "Dad, I see how hard you have to work with your tenants. I see how hard you have to manage with the property managers and the contractors." He goes, "I don't do any of that shit. What a pain in the ass. I think I'm just going to lend money." And so, he's putting some capital together himself, and that's sort of his approach. So I think everybody has a different approach to doing things, and it's not for me to decide for them how to do it. I think it's up to them to choose their path. We're kicking around the idea of creating kind of like a friar family office.
Yeah.
If for those of you who aren't familiar with, a family office, it's kind of like a boutique investment firm for the uber wealthy, right? And so they manage investments, the taxes, the corporate giving for the family, even travel plans and things like that. And so we're going to sit down and do that and do it as a sort of a family unit. So if we're going to start a new business, for example, then one of them is going to have to take on the responsibility of starting the business, and we'll work it. Work it that way. Sorry, let me just flip that off. And we'll work it as a business, as an investment, and we'll start it within our family office. So that was how we kind of decided to approach it, and everybody's ideas will be considered, and we'll work on them.
I love that. I love the idea of like working with the family and building stuff together. I know I heard the quote way back from Bill Gates, and he's like, I'm not giving any money to my kids, but I'll be the first to invest in any of their projects. And I love that idea too.
I have a mastermind that I was participating in, and one of the members has a lending business in the U.S. and he set up a family office. His kids are your kids' age.
Yeah.
So while he can't really give them the project to run with it, they still have their meetings once a month, and he'll go over the numbers and as a family unit and say, here's what we're doing this month. Here's how we're performing. And so there's always a conversation in his household, about business and finances and doing it as a family unit, which kind of resonated with me. And that was kind of what got me started on this idea of, creating our own family office.
Yeah, I love it. And honestly, I think I need to put more work into it, because I think there's a lot of ways to teach my kids as we go, right? Well, I think a lot of it is to teach them to solve problems. It sounds as dumb as that sounds, or simple as that sounds. I constantly am trying to drill that into my kids, because real estate's a vehicle, but like what I do is I solve problems, right? And you're gonna have problems when you're 6 years old, or 5 or 3, and you can figure out ways to solve it. You can figure out ways to do this. And maybe I should. One of my other guests, who's actually one of my friends who comes on here the show all the time, he was telling me that he had his daughter, and they went to like just a play date with another guy who, they're both real estate investors, but their kids were just playing together. And they just were sitting there, and they heard the kids like fighting, and his daughter said to the other daughter, she's like, okay, I'm going to make you a compromise. How about you take the doll for the first 5 minutes, but then I get it for 20 minutes if I wait second. And they sat there and thought about it, and then they agreed on it and went, and they're like, for him, he was like, wow. He's like, this has worked. This has worked. Delayed gratification and negotiating, finding out what they want, making it work for everyone's favor, right? And but anyway, I love that story. So I found a good spot to slip it in. But
Dr. Marshmallow. Have you ever heard that there was a psychological study with young kids about delayed gratification? And they gave them a marshmallow. They put them in a room and said, listen, if you wait for 10 minutes, I'm going to leave you here by yourself. If you wait for 10 minutes, when I come back, if you're still there, I'll give you 2. And then they left, and they videotaped the kids, and they're fighting with themselves. Oh, I can't look at it. And they're trying, and some of them are eating it. They can't stand it. They can't delay their gratification. And some were able to wait. And then they did a longitudinal study. They looked at these kids over time and followed them And I think the finding was that those who were able to delay gratification were more sort of economically successful in life. I'll have to look it up, but
Yeah.
your daughter is well on her way, because not only is she delaying her gratification, but she's finding that property at a discount, and she's enjoying the appreciation on it on top of it.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. Stephen, was there anything I should have asked you that you had in mind you wanted to chat about?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
One of the things that just occurred to me when we were chatting here, though, is maybe we want to have a second date. Maybe what we could do is have the boys come on,
I love it.
and you can ask them about their goals for financial independence and how they plan on achieving financial independence.
That would be awesome. That'd be
And
awesome.
we could have some millennial, I don't know, actually they're too old for millennials, but we could have some younger perspectives on how to achieve FIRE and what their why is, because I think that's really important to understand why you want to do it. Because as you mentioned, if just amassing a certain amount of money is the only goal, when you amass it, you're going to be asking the question, well, is that all there is? Like, what's the next thing on my plate? So I think it's important to kind of define that kind of stuff, and maybe let's ask them.
Yeah. Man, everything you say makes me think of other stuff too. But like a lot of that happens to rock stars. They have this massive goal, and they get to the point where they actually achieved everything, and then they don't know what to do. They don't have a goal set up that's bigger than the goal they're working on, and they finish their goal, and then they get to the top, and more often than it should happen, they either drown themselves in drugs and alcohol or end up killing themselves.
That's
They're so goal driven, and they don't have a next goal.
It's interesting, right? Because I was really affected by the 4-hour work week when I read it. It really motivated me, this idea of being able to set up these muses, I guess, or small businesses that generated revenue, so that you could go passively, so you could go do the things that you want in your life. And life was for Tim Ferriss was like just one big adventure of traveling around and seeing the world and getting different experiences. And he could define that differently in every country kind of that he went to. And so I think, for me, that's kind of, that was my goal, was to be able to have passive income that would allow me the freedom to go around the world and see different things, different experiences, and have both the time and the money to be able to do it at my leisure. But for every person, it's a different goal. And some people, it might just be like staying at home, and it might change over time with your life experiences, but it might be just being able to stay at home with your kids and not have to be a full-time parent and to be there for them. That might be your goal. And maybe that changes when the kids are older and in school, and now you've got more free time. And so you might find something else. But I think life, as we go through different stages, perhaps changes what your goals are. And the idea of being financially independent allows you to constantly sort of reevaluate and change what those objectives are, so that you're not trapped in anything. I think I remember hearing a story one time about Kevin O'Leary. He said, he also had read the 4-hour work week, and after his first business that he sold, he thought that he could do that. He's just going to go live on a beach somewhere. And he said, after about 6 weeks, I was bored, and I came back and started writing another business. So I think for those of us who are sort of career entrepreneurs and who are constantly, have that itch that needs to be scratched, you would probably get bored doing it. So
well, that's honestly, even with myself, I do get bored. And even I get bored with the businesses, but I've learned a lot since my original businesses. And if I can work myself out of the business, then I can work myself start a new one and build it out and slowly work myself out, so that I can have something new to challenge me, right?
Yeah. And if you could build that business in a way, like you said, that you can make an exit and have it continue to run passively, then that's just another income stream towards your final goal of financial independence.
Love it. Stephen, people wanted to get a hold of you. I don't know if you want to be tracked down or not, but if you wanted to, if you have contact.
I don't have this really big check, so no one's going to really be chasing me.
But if anyone wanted to pick your brain about financial independence or maybe some tips with what they're doing with their kids, what's the best way to track you down?
You can reach me at a2z stephen.fryer@gmail, and we're going to be setting up a Facebook page and a website for the boys' journey, and we're going to call it Beards on Fire because everyone's got facial hair.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to find us there.
That's awesome. I'm going to find it. I'm going to join that as soon as. Is it up already, or should I wait a little bit?
No. I've got the website name. We're in the process of building it up right now, and
it might be out by the time this airs, because I think we've probably got a 2-month lead time right now.
Oh, do you? Okay, so then it will likely. Let me make a promise to you then. If it's 2 months as a lead time, I promise you it will be up by then, and people will be able to find us there.
And if anyone's listening and they're shocked to say, whoa, Glenn records his podcast 2 months out. Glenn records his podcast 2 months out going into summer because financial independence, retire early. Do you know what I'm not doing this summer? Is recording podcasts. I'm going to have, my kids are going to be home and I am going to spend time with them. And that's what was important to me. Instead of sitting in my office recording these things, even though I love doing it, there is still better things to do with my time.
Two thumbs up there, brother. Your priorities are in the right place.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for coming on the show, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
No worries. It was my pleasure. And we'll connect and we'll set something up for the boys to come on.
Perfect.